Hat's back on. That's my fiction cap. Don't believe a word I say. Uh, I'm going back to the tale. I'm spinning the tale of Earth's Drink Honeymoon, and I've left the couple, the newlyweds, up there at the Mennonites View. That's the name of that park from up there where the original or the old Mennonite church had been. They're up there, and now they're fine. They're enjoying their day. But now I'm going down to the parents. Now the parents, they were heading back to their hotel, but they were heading back this time. They were going to go down and see what was down there in the sort of gorge in the valley, which they couldn't really see before. But before, and they joined at the parking lot. That's the parking lot where by the tavern and the bank on it restaurant were, and they'd had their meetings, with the guides, separate meetings. But now they were together, the four of them, the 12 bongs of the Carolyn had sounded. It was noon, and while they were there, the 15-minute, of course, sounded da 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 da, just that much, and then they knew it was 12:15. But that was going all the time, and the town was so quiet. It was such a quiet town, even in the middle of the day. Now, not Wednesday or Saturday, or when the train went up through. Those were. It wasn't so quiet, but the rest of the time it was pretty quiet. There was very little traffic down through there. But anyway, before they went down, they'd been in that parking lot, and they looked over a wall, or it was Janny that had found it. He says, "Come here and look at this." And they looked over a wall that was to the south side of the parking lot. And down there, you know, I need to pray to the muse of storytelling to try to, I won't be able to duplicate what they saw down there. It wasn't very far. There had apparently been a foundation of something there, or there was some reason for it to have been there, but it dropped about the height of a pretty high foundation wall, and there was a flat area. But that flat area was full of children and their parents, and they were playing in water. Water was coming out of like little fountains, I guess I should call them, on the concrete wall. Now they were standing there, and the concrete wall, or a lot of it was stone, went on two sides right below them, and then it went along because the road that they'd gone with their carriage ride, it went there, and that was up above too. So they were looking down into this area, which a little hard to explain why it would have been there. Later on, Janny would figure this all out because he'd ask. He would look at the models on the top floor of the Poly, and there he'd spend basically a day. They all would spend basically a day in the Poly. There was so much to see in there, but at the moment they were just struck by the fact that these children were playing in this water, and it was like almost toys had been made for them to play with the water more. And it was, everything was small scale, so you could kind of see that the parents were there just keeping an eye on their children, especially for little children. And besides that area, there was a bank that went down. You're looking south now. A bank that went down, and there was a stream rushing water past. Now that I'm going to put you in Janny's mind, because he was always looking at stuff like engineering. That he knew was the tail race. Well, its nickname, or its name, its formal name, was the tail race, and it had got that name because it was coming out from having passed over the water wheel, or water wheels, whatever it was, in part of the Poly back when it was the leather works. Some of this stuff he doesn't find out until later. I don't know what order to tell it to you, but anyway, and that water was rushing along, and children were playing in it too. They were building little dams. Now that wasn't fixed. That was like just you know, every day would be a little different as the kids would get down there and make little dams. And sometimes they'd have little dams in the water and see if they could get the water to run along the hillside before it would drop back down into the tail race. But you know, it just looked like such a happy scene. Janny, though, was thinking, boy, that water must be cold. That's spring water. That's got to be in its 50s. How can those kids stand that? Well, you know, kids are kids, and sometimes cold water doesn't bother them that much. And he also was reminded, and he mentioned it to the others. He said, you know, this reminds me of, do you remember when we were in Germany at that open air museum in Hagen? Hagen? And do you remember we saw that place where children were playing like that? This is so much like that, but it's more full. And one thing that didn't, you know, I think it might have been Katrina, that Scott's wife, Heidi's mother. She might have been the one that noticed this first. She said, look at the plants on the wall where those fountains are coming out of. Some of those plants are tropical. There's a small banana plant down there, and a little, I guess it may be a traveler's palm, some kind of a palm tree, and a cycad, little, almost like bonsai plants, I think you call them, but they're tropical. How can they be having tropical plants there? Maybe they're potted. They don't look like they're potted, but you could take them in the winter time or something like that, and like an orangery. Do you remember the orangeries that we saw in Paris? They were puzzled by it, and Janny said, "No, that must be warm water. Some of that water down there must be warm water, because otherwise you couldn't have those tropical plants in this climate." And he was going to wonder a lot more about it, but he was also beginning to remember that what was his guide, Raf. Raf had said that this was an FFF, a fossil fuel free area down here. He said, now how are you going to get warm water like that in a fossil fuel free area? I didn't ever see anything about this being a hot spring. It's a real famous spring, the Earth's drink, but I never saw anything about it being a hot spring. So he thought, I'm going to have to talk to Raf about that, because there's definitely warm water down there, and you could tell too by the children. They'd be sort of drawn toward the really warm water, but then they'd go and play in the cold. It was part of the play. Well, I stood there and watched a while. It was like a gallery. They weren't the only ones. There were other ones standing up there too, just watching how much fun they were having. Now, because of modern technology, I can show you what Raf was remembering, or not Raf, what Janny was remembering from their trip in Germany to Hagen, because they had seen a place like that with children playing. Now, it was in cold water, and it wasn't anywhere near as extensive as this. But I'll give you a link so you can actually see what Janny was referring to. Well, then they turned, and then they did head down into the deeper, down the stairs and down into the deeper area. Bye for now.